There's no more serious allegation in 21st century America than to be accused of racist or biased behavior. So I'm going to take this opportunity to categorically and unequivocally reject the base of the assertions made by the ACLU in their lawsuit. Now allow me to step back for a moment. Right now, quite frankly, I don't know if I'm more indignant or depressed that this is what the ACLU wants America to think about the Milwaukee Police Department. Now, I know you can't be part of the story. You have to report the story. But many of the cameramen here today and reporters that cover this story have been in the field with our officers. You've seen the work they do. You've seen the community outreach they engage in. You've seen and reported on the physical risks they take on behalf of our community to keep it safe from crime. If they're willing to risk their lives to protect our disadvantaged communities, then the least I can do is be willing to risk lawsuits to do the same thing. The fundamental flaw of the assertions being made by this group and by others who want to drive a wedge between police and their communities is this: you absolutely cannot discuss or understand the impact of police strategies and tactics if you refuse to acknowledge the hyper-victimization of our disadvantaged communities of color inhabiting the cities of America. It is morally and intellectually dishonest, and it's a form of a lie to try to disentangle those two essential conversations. Now, every week I meet with our district commanders on our CompStat process. I talked to some of them today. You've spoken to them in the past. At no community neighborhood meeting that any of them have ever attended in any neighborhood, but most particularly our most challenged neighborhoods, have they been ever asked for less policing. The people that actually live in the neighborhoods, punctuated by gunfire and non-fatal shootings every night of the week, demand effective and responsive policing. Respectful policing, constitutional policing, thoughtful policing, but they demand to be protected. Now, the concerns of the neighborhoods are never on the agenda of groups like the ACLU because they're not accountable for taking any physical or moral risks on behalf of people who are afflicted by violence. But the police are. The honorable men and women of this department are absolutely committed to the safety of their neighborhoods. Now, here are some data points you won't hear from the ACLU. As we look at the population of Milwaukee, one of the ways we try to figure out where to deploy our resources are where crime and violence are the highest. Why? Because people need to be protected there. So in 2015, the last year we did this analysis, we looked at the rate per 100,000 of each of our groups in Milwaukee and the rate of victimization, because this is data the police department is obligated to respond to. In 2015, the homicide rate per 100,000 for Caucasians was 4.6. For African Americans and Latinos, it was 64. For non-fatal shootings, the non-fatal shooting rate per 100,000 for Caucasians was 15.7. For blacks and Latinos, it was 274. The aggravated assault rate for whites was 307. For African Americans and Latinos, it was 1,206. Now, what is my moral obligation in the light of those statistics? To carefully deploy my department so it doesn't get sued? To carefully make sure that every neighborhood gets precisely the same dosage of policing, regardless of the body count? The answer is no. Now, we need to deploy thoughtfully, But if you look at the maps we've provided many times in the past, the ellipses in this city within which there are the highest rates of poverty, unemployment, and abandoned and foreclosed homes are exactly the same locations where there are the most requested calls for service and the highest concentrations of deadly violence. Now, we're the only police department in the entire state of Wisconsin that, for purposes of transparency, tracks the impact of its strategy on the public. We track our car stops. We report our car stops. No one else in the state does. And everyone is incredibly disinterested in what the rest of the state is up to. We provide the data. We stand behind what we do because we have a moral imperative to protect people. And sadly, the same communities afflicted with the highest rates of poverty, unemployment, and substandard housing are the same communities afflicted by high rates of violence. Now, we know, for many social and historical reasons, the same communities that demand and need our services are often suspicious when they receive those services. We get it, and we've worked hard to ameliorate those concerns through a wide variety of adjustments to our tactics and strategies, working with the community. But we will not be afraid to protect people. That requires a data-driven strategy, grounded in constitutional principles, supported by academic research, proven to be evidence-based, applied fairly and impartially, because it must be distinctly understood. Disparity is not the same as bias. The significant disparities in victimization don't prove bias on the part of violent criminals. And the disparities in the applications of police tactics are driven by the gross disparities in crime victimization in this community. And to do anything else but to be present, available, and visible in the public spaces of this city where violence is greatest would be a dereliction of duty. Now, we know that the propensity to use and carry drugs is equally distributed across all social classes, races, and ethnic groups. We know that. And this has never been about drug enforcement. But public space violence historically and consistently belongs to the poor. It has been true throughout American history, and it is now. And the people that live in those neighborhoods have a right to expect that we'll protect them. And as I said before, if my cops are willing to risk their lives to protect those communities, then I have to be willing to risk lawsuits to do the same.